Week, Vermont is sending 24 delegates to the Democratic National Convention in Chicago, where they will formally nominate Vice President Kamala Harris as the Democratic nominee for president. Thank you for joining us. I'm Darren Perrin.
And I'm Kiana Burks. The convention is happening over 5 decades after the chaotic 1968 Chicago convention. Our Calvin Cutler made the trip to the Windy City and joins us live. Good evening, Calvin.
Yeah, good evening, Kiana. And Darren, the Windy City is right. There's a lot of political history here in Chicago for the Democratic Party. And in an unprecedented election year where the incumbent is stepping back and not running for re-election, some are drawing political parallels between now and the convention 56 years ago. The Windy City is buzzing with politicos and party faithful. Only the second time Chicago has hosted the DNC since 1968.
That was probably, in some ways, the high point as well as the low point of 60s activism.
56 years later, some see similarities, with President Joe Biden stepping back and the ongoing war in Gaza, which has split Democrats and sparked protests on college campuses.
Palestine will be free in our lifetime.
Kevin Kelly, a longtime journalist for many Vermont publications, including 7 Days, who protested at the convention, says in the summer of '68, social, political, and civil unrest reached a fever pitch in the heat of the Vietnam War. Incumbent Democratic President Lyndon Johnson, shrinking in the polls, did not seek re-election. Senator Eugene McCarthy, New York Senator Bobby Kennedy, and Vice President Hubert Humphrey were all jockeying for the nomination. The assassinations of Dr. Martin Luther King, Kennedy, and the ongoing war in Vietnam sparked nationwide civil unrest.
It was an incredibly turbulent and violent time, right? And that fed into what happened in Chicago, the sense of the country just falling apart.
Thousands, including the Radical Youth International Party and Students for a Democratic Society, protested at the convention in '68. Kelly, who was alongside the SDS, recalls violence erupting on the streets, where police clashed with protesters and left 11 people dead.
Take your hands off of me.
Inside the convention, CBS anchor Dan Rather found himself in the crosshairs of violence, too.
Security people put me on the deck. I didn't do very well.
I think we've got a bunch of thugs here, Dan.
But Kelly and former Vermont Governor and DNC Chair Howard Dean say the similarities of 1968 and 2024 are largely superficial.
Martin Luther King was assassinated. 99 cities were burned down. And I'm not talking about the Black Lives Matter protests. I'm talking about Washington didn't recover for 25 years after the fires in Washington.
And unlike '68, the Democratic Party and its delegates have coalesced around Vice President Kamala Harris as the nominee to try to beat former President Trump at the polls in November.
Kamala's got, generating a lot of enthusiasm. She's the first black woman to head a presidential ticket of a major party in this country. It's, really positive energy around that.
And also, unlike today, Vermont's delegation was highly critical of the response of the city of Chicago. In a telegraph to the mayor of Chicago, Governor Phil Hoff criticized the response and said that Vermont's delegation was glad to be out of what he described. We do not believe that the people of Chicago or the people of this country will endure the police state that you imposed on the freedom-loving Americans who came to your city to demonstrate the democratic process. We're pleased to be liberated from your streets as well as from your amphitheater. Now, we'll be catching up with the tomorrow on the Channel 3 News to get a sense as to why they're supporting Vice President Kamala Harris. For now, reporting live in Chicago, Calvin Cutler, Channel 3 News.